Hey everyone, welcome back. When people usually work on a project, they typically start with a pretty reasonable goal, like build the smallest store, build the fastest farm, something that makes sense. Well, today we've got something a little bit different. Our goal is to figure out how we can take as many anvils as possible and pile them all onto a single spot in the shortest amount of time. Now wait a minute, before we showcase the machine, you might be wondering why exactly would somebody build something like this? Well, that's a really good question. Anyways, here's the power button. I'm gonna go ahead and turn on hitboxes so you can see a little bit better what's going on as my game turns into a PowerPoint. Now, a couple things happened. Well, a lot of the anvils typically disappear, and that's just because the way that they're rendered when they're moving fast, it doesn't really always work properly. Also, the sound engine totally breaks, and I had the volume really low, because if it wasn't really low, then it would be really loud. And this machine is extremely loud when it's really loud. Also, my game totally ground to a halt, and that's because this thing shoots 960 anvils per second onto one block. I've run the machine again, and I've frozen it at the tail end of the operation so my computer isn't gasping for air while I show this off. But each of these anvil packets contains exactly 48 anvils, and each one of these packets collides with the ground once every game tick, or 20 times a second. Now before we get into the redstone, let's talk about the important questions. How quickly does it kill a fully armored player? Obviously pretty quickly. Now, how does it fare against something like a warden, for example? Now that might have seemed kind of surprising if you don't know about iframes, but it actually didn't really kill the warden. I forgot that they kind of just can leave, so it did leave, but I managed to grab its health before it had departed, and it had about 20 HP left, which in the context of its 400 HP is about 5%. The reason it didn't die instantly despite the fact that we dropped a few thousand anvils on top of its head is because of invincibility frames, and each time it got hit, all the anvils immediately after it for about half a second basically didn't deal any damage. So does that mean that this machine isn't even that great at killing things? Probably, but it looks pretty cool, and that's most of what I built it to do. Okay, now let's talk about redstone. If you've been part of my community for a very, very, very long time, you might actually know that this new machine is actually derived from this much older machine that does pretty much exactly the same thing, only 48 times smaller. Now, at the time, the goal of this machine wasn't necessarily to pile as many anvils onto one spot as possible, but rather to create the highest frequency anvil beam as possible, which required an anvil every game tick, or 20 per second. And it did this very well with some really interesting timings that use these modules to compress these pistons here, and these slime blocks to launch them into the center of this rotating fence gate funnel. All of these kinds of mechanics actually do make it into the new machine, so it's really interesting that this one manages to fit them all in such a tiny space. But anyways, let's talk about the new machine now. In principle, it's pretty simple. It's just 32 of these smaller modules all stacked together, and the way these work is by having all the anvils on top of these rows of slime blocks, which are extended and then retracted to compress the anvils into the center, and they're all moved towards the side using these slime blocks here. Each of those modules is coupled with another module on this side, and that's repeated 4 times. All of these modules push the anvils in towards this central area, and they're all launched towards the middle by these slime block cannons. Now, while most of this works because of well-timed slime block cannons, there is some really interesting stuff to be looked at here. Like these blocks here, for example. When we bring the anvils in towards the center, we have to actually get them to stop in this middle line, which is why we have these ender chests here. But they also have to miss these blocks when they eventually are launched towards the center, which is why we have a brewing stand here and a lily pad here, because it's the only shape that actually allows to both stop them in the center and for the anvils to pass through when they're launched back up. Things get even more complicated when we need to start accepting the anvils into the central column, and we actually use a really simple, similar fence gate funnel as the machine down there. As you can see, if I progress the game forward, these fence gates are going to exactly open and close at just the right times to accept these anvils into the center and stop all of their momentum, allowing them to fall straight down. This setup is repeated 4 times in the center because, due to the fact that all these cannons are positioned in different spots, all the anvils reach the center at different heights, and we need to put a fence gate funnel module at each of the 4 possible heights. The reason why we can't exactly just open and close all the fence gates at the same time to accept all the anvils in at once is because each of these modules actually sends out their anvil packets 1 game tick offset from their neighbors. And that's how we achieve having an anvil packet every single game tick. So to get away from redstone for a moment, we're going to go back to testing stuff. If you noticed earlier, my helmet essentially instantly vaporized. And this might seem a little weird, because I technically only took 2 hits of anvil damage, which notably would not be enough to break a helmet. The reason my helmet still broke is because helmets actually don't receive invincibility frames when being damaged by anvils, for some reason. Now, in order to see exactly how much damage this machine does to my helmet, I've gone ahead and set up a command block that automatically swaps in a new helmet if mine breaks. And it also keeps track on the side here, telling me how many helmets have been broken. I have basically infinite resistance here to prevent me from dying, and I've loaded the machine with roughly 5,300 anvils. So after reviewing the footage, it turns out that I forgot to reset my count before starting the machine. So in reality, it only broke 112 helmets. And if you actually divide the number of anvils I dropped on myself by 48, the number of anvils per tick, you get that same number, meaning that I broke a helmet essentially every single game tick. And to be honest, this makes sense, because obviously 48 anvils is enough to break a helmet, and the command block can only swap in my helmet every single game tick, so it's kind of difficult to see exactly how much damage this machine is dealing to my head. Anyways, that'll be it for today. If you like my kinds of videos and my projects, make sure to subscribe so you can check out all the other stupid stuff I'm working on. I've got a bunch of cool projects lined up. Make sure to also check out the Discord server in the description, and make sure to like the video as well if you liked it. That'll probably be it. Okay, bye bye.